with the latest on the corporate front, all the market trends, expert opinion, and sound business advice. It is your unique window into the business world, direct from the heart of China.
Hello and welcome to Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. Coming up, we will have half an hour of business news and analysis. On today's show, leaders of the BRICS countries wrap up the two-day summit in Rio de Janeiro. What's the outcome? And Nvidia becomes the most valuable company in the world. What are the main factors for its growth? And now let's begin with our top story. Chinese Premier Li Qiang says BRICS countries should strive to become the vanguard in advancing the reform of global governance. He made the remarks at the 17th BRICS summit in Rio de Janeiro. Premier Li called on the bloc to safeguard world peace and tranquility and promote the peaceful settlements of the disputes. Leaders of the BRICS countries have also reached consensus on a broad range of issues, from global governance to climate change and peace and security. So for more on this, joined us on the line now are Professor Qu Qiang, Fellow of Belt and Road Research Center at Minzu University of China, Li Lun, Assistant Professor of Economics, Peking University, and also Yan Liang, Professor of Economics, Willamette University. So yeah, I will start with you in the declaration or statements put out by the BRICS countries. One is about the condemnation of tariffs, the increase of tariffs by some major countries. So what does it say about the consensus within the BRICS on trade?
Well, I think this clearly shows that the BRICS members uphold multilateralism and open for trade and investment and other international economic interactions. They condemn the imposition of unilateral coercive measures that are contrary to international law, and that includes, these multilateral trading systems that are pretty much under the agreements with the WTO and other bilateral trading relationships that the United States and other countries have reached. They didn't mention the specific country, the United States in this case, but it's very clear that this condemnation is targeting at the United States' unilateral tariff war, and they also talked about to remove all these unlawful measures to affirm that the BRICS member states support these kinds of multilateral trading system. So in other words, again, these countries believe that open and free international trade is very important for their own economic development and also for peace and security and prosperity of the global economy. And therefore, these kinds of unilateral trade and tariff war needs to be condemned and to be stopped.
And Professor Qu Qiang, so I want to ask you about President Donald Trump's tariff threat on BRICS nations. So do you think this latest tariff threat further proves that the global south needs to cooperate more with each other to build up each other's economic resilience and open new markets?
Well, I think you ask a very good question. So I think Trump's this condemnation doesn't mean very reasonable reason behind that. Why is that? It's because how do you define this kind of a anti-America kind of actions? So if I am a trade partner, if I decided to use the my own money to settle with my own trade partners, and I don't want to use US dollar, or I try to cooperate with my trade partners because the United States is pushing so much of the extra streams and putting on so much of the extra tariffs or punishment towards myself. So I got the freedom to choose who I partner with or trade with. So that shows that, answering your question, that all the global South nations more than ever and more necessarily need to work with each other to form a more fair and more equal, respective, global trade orders within themselves, so that they wouldn't been pinched by the other, hegemony nations. If you are strong, you have all the liberty to just bully other nations. I don't think this kind of a trade is really worth it.
And Li Lun, actually, Premier Li Qiang also called on BRICS to become the vanguard of global governance reform. So in your view, how much influence does BRICS actually have on the global stage today?
Yeah, so the BRICS country, if you look at it, they account for over 40% of global GDP. Of course, it's purchasing power parity, and it has more than 40% of the world population. And I think more importantly, it's also includes some of the fastest growing economies in the world. So compare with, for example, the G7 economy, the G7 account for approximately like 28 to 30% of the GDP versus the BRICS 40%. Also, the G7, grows at a much slower rate than the BRICS country. So we're seeing the growth momentum and the sheer scale of the economy of the BRICS country. And we're also seeing the institution building power for the BRICS. For example, if we look at the history of the New Development Bank, which is a multilateral development bank established by the BRICS countries, they already lent over 40 billion US dollars for infrastructure and local currency lending projects, which is becoming a growing alternative to IMF or World Bank. So we're seeing actually, as Premier Li Qiang is saying, BRICS is more and more becoming the vanguard of global governance reform. And I think part of the reason is not the BRICS itself has a lot of influence and coercion like the U.S. is doing, but rather I think it's more like the global population is asking for reform, asking for changes for the global governance, for the format of global governance.
And Yan Zhou Premier Li also highlighted the vision of global governance based on extensive consultation, joint contribution, and shared benefits. So how does this vision differ from the Western-led frameworks?
Well, I think this really provides a very different and alternative sound principle for global governance. So as we recall, the creation of the BRICS is strengthening global South cooperation for a more inclusive and sustainable governance. So really the governance issue is at the center of the BRICS' joint efforts to really reform the global system. And when it comes to governance, I think there are many different levels in this declaration that they talk about governance of climate efforts, in public health efforts, governance in digital and data, governance in different international institutions like the IMF and WTO that they specifically mentioned. And so I agree with Li Lun, the current global governance system is very lopsided. It's basically dominated by the Western countries, and they do not really include sufficiently the global South's priorities and voices and interests. So according to, again, the voting shares at the IMF, for example, the BRICS only account for about 18% of the voting share, despite having, over 40% the GDP shares. Compared to the G7, they only have about 30% of the GDP, but then they account for 41% of the voting share. And US alone account for 16.49% of the voting share. So just one example to show this international monetary system is very much dominated by the Western countries and Western interest. And so what that means is, these financial institutions are not adequate in providing, for example, debt relief to the global South countries. They're not sufficient in providing climate finance or development finance to achieve the SDGs. So all of this just shows the current governance system is Western dominant, is very inadequate, is predatory, it's not based on the kind of consultation. There's no joint efforts, there's no shared benefits. The benefits are pretty much going into the rich Western countries. So that just means that this governance system needs urgent reform. And I think the BRICS, representing the great majority of the emerging market economies, really help to provide an alternative framework. And here, I think China definitely plays a very large role when it comes to the kinds of governance principles, extensive consultation, and joint efforts and joint contributions and shared benefits. And I think that is very much manifested in China's three initiatives, global initiatives, and also in its BRI. And it shows that many of these efforts are made by various participants based on the equal consultation, and the benefits are widely shared in a mutually beneficial way. So this definitely provides a different blueprint for the global system going forward.
And Li Lun, actually, this year's BRICS Summit gave AI governance a prominent place on its agenda for the first time. So how significant is that? And what unique perspective does the Global South bring to the global conversation on the AI regulation?
Yeah, I think the mere fact that the AI governance as a topic is first introduced at a global summit is very meaningful. And I looked at some of the examples. I think instead of focusing of AI on, for example, military power, this conference, this summit is talking more about using AI to improve people's living conditions and to provide innovative solutions to people's need. For example, we're seeing China's example of the Healthy China 2030 program, also the Tencent's Miyin platform, which can look at the X-rays and help diagnosis of cancer, especially in the early stage, is mentioned in the summit's program. Also, we're seeing mentioning of the education, especially in the digital age. AI can be used as a tool to help skill development, especially for the developing countries, especially in the STEM disciplines, for example, like engineering and mathematics. We're also seeing topics about food security, decarbonization, smart cities, and I think the meaning of this topic is that the BRICS countries can collaborate together and solve on the common problems together and using each other's advanced technologies. For example, if other BRICS countries want to use Tencent's technology in early diagnosis of cancer, they can go ahead and use that technology. And for example, Russia, we're seeing has launched the digital agricultural program, which they have used automated, agricultural machines to harvest their crops. So maybe in the future, we can use that technology in our country as well. So I think this collaboration really highlights, the potential and future for the BRICS country to have their unique application of the, most cutting edge technologies benefited by AI.
And so, Professor Qu Qiang, what specific challenges do developing countries face in the AI development and governance, and how can BRICS cooperation help to address these gaps?
Well, I think for the AI development, I think the most important resources is human brain. I think it's a brain power. I think the nurturing of the talents and also the education system, the number of engineers or the size of the fleet of the engineers actually matters the most. I think the current problem we have is that global South nations have lots of, still have lots of shortcomings in nurturing this type of talents. That's for sure. Because I think we still are developing our higher education system, and also in some other nations, for example, in some listed developed nations, their basic or fundamental education systems remain to be improved. So that's the problem one. And number two, I think, is in the higher technology, especially in the chips and the semiconductors. So while developed nations and the markets are using their hegemony and domination power in this area just to monopolize the whole market. And more than that, I think they try to weaponize this kind of the tools to boycott and also choke the developing nations to master this power to develop their own AI, because realize how important the AI will mean to this developing nations. It's probably going to help them to cut the corners, just to catch up with the developed nations. So just take a look at the whole world right now. Only America and China and only a few nations in Europe and Japan and South Korea, they have working AI by their own. And especially China and America have the actually competable AI in their two countries. The other nations, not only the global South nations, but also many developed nations, wouldn't have this kind of the power and technology. So I think one good point and advantage of the global South nations that they have China on their side. China are more than willing to spill over this kind of technologies to form a network of the AI. Right now, in many Chinese companies in their AI development, they have been, try to include global South nations talents students, engineers, and the companies to join them to share these technologies and development experiences and overcome the common challenges in semiconductors and the GPU and etc. So I think this will form a really good ecology to help everybody to catch up in this area. But also, I have to say, the common challenges and difficulties still there, so we still need to work together and work hard.
And Yan, so in the AI development and governance, how can the BRICS cooperation help to address those gaps? What do you think?
Well, I think as Li Lun mentioned earlier, various BRICS countries have their own strengths when it comes to the AI development and also AI adoption. But I think the most fundamental problem here is, again, there is a very large AI digital gap. So I think this idea that we need to kind of share technologies and promote kind of a joint collaborations in AI development, I think is essential. And at this juncture, I think it's not only important to help to provide education and digital infrastructure and AI foundational technologies to each members, but also is to build this consensus in terms of AI governance. And the Joint Declaration on AI governance has emphasized on, for example, sovereignty, non-interference, human-centered, development focus, inclusivity, and certain risk management, bridge the digital gap, and also take into account ethical principles and pay attention to international law, reject monopolies. So these 9 principles that this declaration articulates, I think really hit the main targets of the AI governance framework. So I think these are 2 sort of prompt methods. On the one hand is to try to bridge the digital gap by sharing technologies and by making joint efforts in developing the technology and sharing the adoptions. And on the other hand is trying to improve the AI governance system. So to kind of bridge the global north and south's gap when it comes to the power and the say in this AI governance structure. So I think those 2 are really essential to be able to promote inclusive and sustainable and really healthy utilization of AI technology.
Well, we're speaking with Yan Liang, Professor of Economics, Willamette University, Professor Qu Qiang from Minzu University of China, and also Li Lun, Assistant Professor of Economics, Peking University. And after a short break, Nvidia becomes the most valuable company in the world. Stay with us. You are listening to Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. The AI chip maker Nvidia becomes the most valuable company in the world. It has become the first company to reach a market value of $4 trillion, and this is edging past Apple's long-standing record. This is not just a stock market story. It is also about global influence. In Europe, Nvidia is building vast AI infrastructure, partnering with governments in France, the UK, and Germany to lay down the digital infrastructure. It also plans to appear at China's International Supply Chain Expo for the first time later this month. So, Li Lun, actually, Nvidia becomes the most valuable company in the world. So, tell us, why is it? What contributed to its growth?
Yeah, so on Wednesday, it surpasses the valuation above 4 trillion, becoming the first company to do so. I think most importantly is still its growth fundamentals, right? So its Q1 revenue is around $44 billion, and which is a 69% year-on-year increase from a year ago. So for the Q2, it also expects to have the around the same revenue. So for a company that can have a revenue of 45 billion for just a quarter, I think it definitely has the potential to reach this 4 trillion valuation. Also, we're seeing a fast development of AI, especially in Europe. As you mentioned, the Nvidia has reached many deals with many European governments. So according to many reporters, Europe has gone all in AI. So there are at least 20 AI data centers that are planned across Europe to be constructed in the next few years. And also the CEO of Nvidia said in a conference in Paris that he predict there's going to be a tenfold increase in Europe's data center capacity within the next 2 years. So we're expecting a huge increase in the GPUs and advanced chips manufactured by Nvidia. So of course investors are super hyped about Nvidia.
So yeah, actually, as Li Lun mentioned, the Nvidia CEO Jason Huang announced multiple sovereign AI partnerships during a European tour. So how significant is that in shaping the Europe's digital future?
Right. So first of all, I think I agree with Li Lun. I think Nvidia and the entire AI industry is really on the rise. At the same time, though, there are also some concerns about whether or not this sort of a hype is it's overblown. When you look at the forward PE ratio, the S&P is about 23, Nvidia is 37. So there's definitely some kind of optimism that is promoting its share values. Now, when it comes to the sovereign AI, this is the idea that data centers and servers that are providing services to users need to be located regionally rather than abroad. And so that has to do with, the data issues, and also has to do with, being closer to the market to build the entire ecosystem. So Nvidia has been promoting this idea of sovereign AI with many countries' governments and regional cloud and telecommunication firms, and also technology centers in Europe, especially in countries like Italy, France, Armenia, Germany, and Spain. So I think, as we know, Nvidia is very well known for its hardware GPU, and it's also ramping up in its focus on software offering. So that means, its ecosystem is quite complete. And so with Nvidia's contribution and participation in building the AI infrastructure in Europe, I think this really helped to boost the Europeans' computing capacities and also their entire digital ecosystem. I think that the estimate here is that Europe's computing capacity is going to rise very significantly due to the sovereign AI initiative. But that said, I think the European AI landscape is still lagging behind compared to the United States and China, both in terms of the investments, its foundational technologies when it comes to large language models, but also in terms of their AI talents and other aspects like AI patents and so on. They're still very much lagging. So I think there's still a long way for the European countries to catch up and to improve their AI capabilities.
And yeah, so for its China strategy, Nvidia is going to attend China's Supply Chain Expo for the first time later this month. So what signal can we read from Nvidia's participation here?
Well, I think according to the organizer of the expo, this is really a vote of confidence that Nvidia, despite all the geopolitical tension, despite Trump's double down on the tech ban, Nvidia and other 100 American companies are coming to this expo. This just showcased that first of all, China is a very large market. China accounts for about half of the global AI related markets. And Nvidia has been, making a lot of profits by, taking up some of the Chinese market shares. So I think this is a market that is very important. China accounts for about 13% of Nvidia last year's sales. And for other companies like Intel, China accounts for 27%, and Qualcomm, China accounts for half of their annual revenues. So that just means, this market is very important. It's not being missed out by these tech giants, again, despite all these heightened geopolitical and political tensions. And second, I think it's very essential for these tech firms to be in China and understand China's market needs, because China is also a leading innovator in the AI space. So, missing out China would mean that they're not going to be able to partake in the China's innovation system. And I think with the launch of DeepSeek, it clearly shows that China is very much leading in the AI technology, and none of these firms wants to be missed out in terms of the collaboration opportunities, technological development opportunities with China.
And Nvidia CEO Jason Huang also openly suggested that the U.S. government's attempt to limit China's access to the cutting-edge AI chips has backfired and made the Chinese tech companies stronger. So, yeah, how do you explain his point here?
Well, I agree with him. I think he has a very good point. He being an entrepreneur, he has been always modest, and he's very, usually cool-headed, right, when it comes to political matters. But he still, in this case, he said the Trump's administration's measures for tech ban have been a failure because they simply prompt Chinese firms to accelerate their own product development and launches. And that would benefit the Chinese competitors, especially Tencent and Huawei, from Nvidia's point of view, because these companies are very capable and they've been accelerating in their research and development to develop AI hardware. Jensen Huang basically says that 4 years ago, Nvidia had 95% market share in China, but today the figure has dropped to 50%. And again, the gap between Chinese firms and Nvidia is very rapidly, narrowing. So when Trump said, the Nvidia is not allowed to export H20 chip, that simply means that the market is going to be protected and reserved for the Chinese firms, and at the same time cost Nvidia about $15 billion in sales. And now Nvidia is trying to develop a new chip, the so-called B30, for the Chinese market that would comply with the U.S. export regulations. But still, given the very narrow gap with the Chinese chips, especially the Ascent chips with the Nvidia H20, it's not quite clear how this B30 may or may not be competitive in the Chinese market. So I think it's very clear that when it comes to the technological companies, they would really like to collaborate with China. But I think the political and economic policies that the Trump administration have been adopting is pretty much counterproductive in that regard.
Well, we're speaking with Yan Liang, professor of economics, Willamette University, and Li Lun, assistant professor of economics, Peking University. And that's all the time for this edition of Biz Today. To listen to this episode again or to find more previous episodes, you can download our podcast by searching for Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. Thank you so much for listening.